Hey, what is up guys? Welcome back to another episode of Project E. This will be episode 11. Now, of course, for you guys, you might be expecting me to put this out back in November, at least the 30th of November, because this is something I've been doing at the end of every single month, where I've pretty much just been recapping the month on what I actually got rid of for all of the decks that I actually own. So I do have a lot of decks and I've been working pretty hard on getting rid of a lot of them throughout the entire year. So the fact that we've now reached this particular point, I am definitely quite proud of myself for where I've actually come. But as you guys can see, we are on the 8th of December now, so from that you could tell that I'm obviously a week late from this. But you know what, ever since I stopped doing daily uploads, it's kind of okay. It's a bit of a pass I gave for myself to not have to upload on the exact day of the episode. But you know, with that being said, we can still just catch up with things right now, because to be honest, this episode is going to be a bit different from any other of the previous episodes, because in this particular episode, I actually have to declare that I have plateaued in terms of getting rid of decks. In fact, I don't have any decks at all to talk about to get rid of, rather just decks that I'm going to be preventing myself from getting into. So in the previous episode, I got rid of a few decks, but at the same time I built 2 new decks, which kind of added more to the collection rather than me getting rid of the cards, or at least the decks. So in this particular month of it, or in this particular episode, I've actually reached that point where I really just can't think of what deck I want to get rid of now, because with what I have left over, I'm truly attached to the remaining decks that I have left. You know, they kind of resonate with me to a certain degree, and to get rid of even one of them is definitely going to be quite a struggle. Now, I do have thoughts on getting rid of specific decks out there as well, but I don't want to just go ahead and naming them and then not get rid of them later on. So for the time being, I'm just looking through all my decks, giving them another go in this particular format, just by doing testing outside of I guess YouTube itself, and that way I could get a better idea and be a little bit more objective in what decks need to go and what decks can actually stay. However, today I'm obviously going to be talking about the specific decks that I'm going to prevent myself from getting into, and by actually talking about it in this particular episode, it's kind of keeping a record of that, so I'm going to have to stay accountable for that, and as a result I won't be building those decks, and hopefully that's the case. So if you guys have seen the previous episodes, you guys might have recalled that I got rid of the Speed Road core that I actually had, and this was prior to Synchro Storm actually coming out, so that's something that kind of made sense. Now for you guys, you obviously are thinking, what am I going to do now that the Speed Roads are actually out with new supports? Well, I'm pretty much certain that I will not be building Speedroids, although they reprinted a bunch of the old cards again, although they gave us a lot of the new cards, and you could easily buy a core from this as well. I'm not going to get into Speedroids again. It was something I decided that I would get rid of, and I'm going to keep that promise and not get back into Speedroids again. I just don't want to add too many decks into my collection, and Speedroids was just something that had to go. So with Synchro Storm being out, as tempting as it is, I will definitely be putting a stop to it. However, I did still express my interest for the Lyrilusk as well as the Fleur cards as well. So that was definitely quite a bit different. Now with the Lyrilusk, I do still intend to continue building them, as much as it's going to hurt my wallet with all of the expensive new support for the Lyrilusk deck. I'm not going to be giving up on them at all. I'm pretty certain that I'll be keeping the Bracelet Girl decks, so that would be the Melodious, the Lyrilusk, the Wind Witches, and the Lunalights. All of those decks I own, but I am not going to be getting rid of them. They're definitely the ones that will be staying for sure. But with that being said, the other deck I talked about with keen interest was the Fleur deck, and that was just a really interesting archetype. You know, it wasn't necessarily its own archetype prior to this. It was usually played as a bit of an extension in the Synchro decks, or at least the somewhat of a Quasar deck. I mean, you could still go into Fleur de Chevalier, but it wasn't necessarily the best thing out there. I mean, it wasn't necessarily a win con because it couldn't necessarily OTK, and it was not something that was worthwhile going into compared to all the other synchros of the same level. But when the new support was actually announced for Synchro Storm, it did get me excited. However, I now realize that that initial excitement is something that is almost a bit of a trick into actually getting players into buying a deck. But as I reevaluated and thought about it more and more, I realized I'm not going to build this deck at all. I mean, it's not worth it. It might have actually attracted me by the actual new support and the potential effects it could do, but to force myself, or rather to just get myself to build a new deck every time something gets announced, I'm just going to be following the same pattern as in the past, and again I'm going to end up with way over 100 decks, which is something I definitely do not want. So with that being said, it's really just the Lyrilusks that I actually want from Synchro Storm. So that's kind of good news and bad news. The good news is I don't actually have to buy Synchro Storm itself, I just have to buy the Lyrilusk cards individually. The bad news is the Lyrilusks are extremely expensive, so to buy singles with them is going to really hurt. I mean, a lot of the key cards in the deck are actually over $20 each, so to get playsets of some of them as well, which some of them you actually do need playsets of, you're definitely going to be spending close to $200 on just a few of these new cards, which is quite ridiculous. So I am hoping that eventually they will be reprinted. Obviously that's a long time away, but you know, I'm not going to be buying packs, so I can't hope to pull these cards. But with this slower progression towards finishing the Lyrilusk deck, at least I won't have too many cards to focus on all at once. Now next up, I wanted to quickly talk about Brothers of Legend as well. So this particular set introduced a lot of amazing reprints actually. It was just something that really got me interested. I am definitely going to be hoping to pull some packs out of this and get some really amazing reprints for a lot of these decks. It's fantastic, it's all great. You know, there's the Altergeist support, there is also the Fossil Digs, which I want a rarity bump to ultra rare, which is fantastic of course. There's so much good support in this particular set. There's so many cards that you could just use to bump up the rarities of your cards for your current decks. It's a fantastic set, I absolutely love it. However, with that being said, it's not like I own every single deck that's going to be reprinted in this particular set, or at least that's going to be supported in this particular set. And the two decks that I do not own that are actually being supported in this set are the Karibos and the Appliances. And I just wanted to make it clear that I have no intention of building these two decks. I think that they're interesting, but they don't necessarily capture my attention. They don't necessarily resonate with me to such a degree that it's worth building or it's worth pursuing these cards to actually accumulate. So with that being said, those two decks I'm definitely just making sure that I do not build them by actually recording it here in this particular episode. But that's pretty much it. I am definitely very happy with how much I've actually got rid of. If you guys are actually looking on the screen right now, you'll see a screenshot of my entire list of things that, or at least decks that I've actually got rid of, or at least I've set to not build, just to make sure that I don't add more to the collection. So that's definitely fantastic, but that also does mean that I have a lot of decks remaining, and you guys will actually see that on the screen right now as well. There are a lot of decks left over in my actual collection, so I definitely am a bit stuck. I mean, maybe you guys could give me some suggestions as to what deck I should get rid of next. I mean, it's pretty odd, right? Mostly I'd be asking if you guys want to see some other decks added on, but in this case I do want to cut down on the collection just because things are actually starting to get a bit messy. However, that was pretty much it for today's episode, so I do hope you guys have a fantastic day. I will see you guys again for episode 12, which will be the final episode, so we are definitely very close to the end, and that particular episode will definitely be out on December the 31st, so do stay tuned for that. But with that being said, thanks for joining me today. Hope you all have a fantastic day. I'll see you all next time.